Before anything else, if you truly follow the Golden State Warriors, if you live every game, every adjustment, every heavy backroom decision, hit the like button and subscribe now, because what's at stake here isn't internet rumor. This is behind-the-scenes talk with real impact, the market shifting, a major piece moving on the board, and above all, a discussion that could change the team's level around Stephen Curry. So do that now, because from here on, we're going to connect every dot calmly, logically, and with the cold clarity this moment demands, without losing the emotion of understanding what might be taking shape inside the franchise. The Warriors are back at the center of the market conversation for a simple reason. When you have Stephen Curry playing at a high level, every window of opportunity becomes a quiet demand. Nobody inside the organization wants to look back and realize a season was wasted because of a lack of courage, too much caution, or a bet that took too long to mature. And that is exactly why the name Michael Porter Jr. is coming up with such force. Not as social media gossip, but as an idea that fits multiple layers of modern basketball. Instant scoring, floor spacing, size on the perimeter, and elite shooting to punish any defense that dares to let Curry breathe. When you think about what it means to play next to Curry, you understand why certain players seem to come back to life in San Francisco. It's not magic, it's gravity. Curry pulls the defense like a magnet and creates a map of space that very few teams can deny for a full 48 minutes. And Michael Porter Jr. is the kind of wing who turns space into a sentence. He doesn't need an entire offense designed just for him. He needs half a step, a late closeout, a single second of hesitation, and that's it. A three, a mid-range pull-up, a cut to the rim, an offensive rebound with size and reach. He's a constant threat without demanding control of the game. Now add that to a scenario where Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green share the same locker room. Butler alone changes a team's tone. He lives on pressure, lives on contact, lives on attacking the rim as if every possession is a statement. When he gets into the paint, he forces the defense to choose, help and leave someone open or stay one-on-one and accept the risk of fouls, collapse, and wear. And it's at that exact point that Porter Jr. becomes an almost automatic weapon. Because when help comes, the open shot appears. And when the open shot appears, a tall, confident shooter with a quick trigger becomes the type of piece that decides big games. Draymond completes the machine the way he always has, connecting everything without needing to be the top scorer. He sees the pass before the cut even exists. He speeds up the offensive flow with decisive reads. And on the other end, he gives the team defensive identity, communication, switch recognition, cover, and mental aggression. If the Warriors are thinking about Porter Jr., it's because they believe they can absorb his defensive limitations through collective intelligence, positioning, and a structure that knows how to hide weak points when the offense makes it worthwhile. But no trade of this size happens without a cost, and the name at the center of that equation is Jonathan Kuminga. And here there's no room to romanticize it. Kuminga is talent, explosion, youth, potential. He's the kind of player who could become a star in another context, with more volume, more freedom, and less urgency. But the Warriors live with urgency. They live on Curry's clock. They live with the need to turn promise into results. And that's the dilemma. Do you bet on an immediate leap with a player who is ready to score at a high level right now? Or do you hold on to the young piece who could still become a pillar of the future? The point is that for the other side, Kuminga makes sense for several reasons, especially if the conversation involves a team reshaping its direction and thinking about its own timeline. With a salary around $22.5 million, he becomes a functional piece to build a package and, at the same time, a real value development bet. He's young enough to grow, physically built to handle a larger role, and has room to improve technically away from the daily pressure of title expectations. And the league runs a lot on this, matching timelines. What is too heavy for a win-now team can be gold for a team organizing its next cycle. But then comes the hard part, the part that kills any illusion of a simple swap. Michael Porter Jr.'s contract is big, close to $38.3 million for the season. That changes everything, because at that level, it's not enough to want it. The maths have to work. The rules have to fit. The payroll has to balance. You have to find matching contracts, and often you have to accept that a deal like this needs sweetener, a draft pick, a rotation player, or a combination that makes the other side see value beyond the main name. That's why, behind the scenes, it's not just Kuminga for Porter. It's about building a package. And building a package means changing depth, changing rotation, changing pieces fans sometimes don't even put at the center of the debate, but that matter in a playoff game when Plan A stalls and Plan B has to exist. The Warriors know that. The front office knows that. And when there's a signal of serious interest, what happens internally is an impact debate. What happens to the defense? What happens to the rebounding? What happens to switching? What happens to size against more physical teams? And what happens to the team's ability to survive when Curry sits? Because the Western Conference doesn't forgive. You look around and you see teams that are younger, deeper, more athletic, with suffocating defense and high tempo. The Oklahoma City Thunder are one example of a team that arrives with legs, hunger, and consistency. The Denver Nuggets are another, with an established identity and the ability to control big games. To get close to those teams, it's not enough to play beautiful basketball. You need a real scoring threat. You need someone who punishes every defensive help mistake, and above all, you need to reduce the offensive weight that falls on Curry's shoulders when a series tightens. Michael Porter Jr. is being sold as exactly that, a guy who raises the ceiling immediately. He comes in and makes the offense feel bigger, wider, harder to guard. He doesn't need long possessions, and that matters in a system built on off-ball movement and quick decisions. At the same time, defense becomes the discussion point, not because he's an unavoidable disaster, but because he's not the type of specialist who solves perimeter problems by himself. So the question becomes a scale. How much does the offense rise, and how much does the defense need to be compensated through scheme, communication, and complementary pieces? That's where alternative scenarios start to appear, and they make the story even more interesting. Because when a big contract is on the table, the market often pushes towards a multi-team trade. And when you talk about multiple teams, you get the possibility of fitting crossed interests. One team wants youth, another wants an expiring deal, another wants a shooter, another wants a defensive rotation piece. In that kind of architecture, Jonathan Kuminga can become the currency that unlocks not only Porter Jr., but also secondary adjustments that protect the Warriors' identity. There's also the fact that Kuminga has, at other times, drawn interest from more than one franchise. And when a young player attracts more than one look, his value grows not only because of his ability, but because of competition. Because the Warriors' front office can use that interest to raise the ambition of the return or to build an alternative route if the main door doesn't open. And that's how negotiations grow. One conversation leads to another, one interest creates a fit, and as the trade deadline approaches, patience drops and reality eats the bluffs. What makes everything even heavier is the question hovering over the franchise like a shadow. Are the Warriors willing to sacrifice part of the future to maximize Curry's remaining season? That question isn't dramatic by accident. It defines strategy, culture, and how the team will be remembered when this era ends. Holding on to draft picks can be prudent, but it can turn into regret if the team goes out early and realizes one piece was missing to turn good possessions into decisive points. On the other hand, burning picks and depth can leave the team vulnerable, especially if injuries hit or if the defense doesn't hold in May and June. And while this Porter Jr. story creates a firestorm of speculation and possibilities, another Warriors narrative appears, very different but equally intriguing. The possibility of Kai Sotto entering the radar. Here the theme shifts. Out goes the now or never logic with a massive contract, and in comes the logic of development, international reach, and a bet that mixes basketball with cultural and commercial impact. Kai Sotto is a young Filipino center, very tall, around 2.16 meters, with a profile that stands out for more than just size. He has touch, vision, and a repertoire beyond the classic stationary big. He shows mid-range shooting, well-developed hooks, and the ability to find teammates with reads. Defensively, his height helps with contests and rim protection, but the central NBA test will always be pace, mobility, and strength against opponents who attack space as if rest doesn't exist. When you place Kai Sotto inside the Warriors' ecosystem, the question becomes, is there room for a center like that to grow on a team that demands reading, switching, and constant movement? Because Steve Kerr's system, historically, isn't kind to slow bigs. It demands quick decisions, passing, angles, positioning, and above all, the ability not to be an easy target in defensive switches. So if Kai enters this conversation, he enters as an adaptation project. Build strength, improve conditioning, train lateral mobility, learn to communicate defense, and understand that often the right play is the simple pass at the right moment. The fascinating side, beyond basketball, is the connection with the Bay Area. The region has a huge Filipino community, passionate, present, and engaged. A Filipino player joining the Warriors wouldn't just be roster depth, it would be a cultural event. And the NBA understands this like few leagues do. Globalization runs through representation, through identification, through building bridges between fans and franchises. And at that point, Kai Sotto could generate a real wave of engagement, both in the arena and internationally, something franchises consider carefully when the on-court cost of the bet isn't prohibitive. But the Warriors can't afford to romanticize. If Kai comes in, he has to show he can handle the NBA, that he doesn't become a pick-and-roll target, that he understands game timing, that he doesn't break the defensive system, that he can rebound and bring physical presence when the team faces big, heavy opponents. Because today's league demands centers who protect the rim and also survive outside the paint. And that's the challenge that separates potential from real rotation value. What's interesting is how these two stories speak to the same background. The franchise is trying to balance present and future at the same time. Porter Jr. represents the immediate jump, expensive, risky, but capable of raising the offensive ceiling right now. Kai Sotto represents a development bet, with cultural impact, and a chance to eventually provide size and presence in a league that still demands that when games get physical. And that's exactly why the backroom intensity is so high. Because it's not about a single move, it's about identity. It's about which version of the Warriors will exist over the next few years. A team willing to pay a steep price to maximize Curry now, or a team trying to build alternatives with smart bets without burning all its flexibility. But in the middle of it all, there's one detail nobody can ignore. Curry's window doesn't wait. The clock doesn't slow down. And when the season enters the hottest stretch, every decision gets judged not by speeches, but by results. Wanting everything to fit means facing the story for what it is. The Warriors are standing in front of two roads that look different, but, in practice, meet at the same point. One is the path of immediate impact, expensive, heavy, and demanding results now. The other is the path of intelligent building, fitting development with real roster needs, while expanding the future base without abandoning the present. And what makes those roads cross is the same question hovering silently over the locker room and the front office. How do you keep Stephen Curry competitive without becoming a hostage to one single move that could cost years of flexibility? If the organization decides to press the accelerator for Michael Porter Jr., the plan is clear. Turn the offense into something even harder to contain in the playoffs. Because in a long series, the opposing defense maps tendencies, removes comfort, and tries to force the Warriors into living on contested shots. What Porter Jr. offers is precisely the ability to convert even when the shot isn't perfect, and to punish when it is. That changes the maths of the game. The opponent starts paying a high price for any exaggerated help on Curry, for any double on Butler, for any split-second distraction when Draymond finds the right pass. But that same package creates instant pressure on the rotation. If the Warriors put Kuminga in the deal and still have to include more contracts to reach the number, the team risks losing not only talent, but legs. And in today's NBA, legs have become as valuable as shooting. That's why internally a move of this size is never evaluated only by the main player. It's evaluated by the domino effect. Who leaves with him, who remains on the wing, who handles the ugliest defensive possessions, who guards the opponent's top scorer, who secures rebounds when Draymond plays 5, who can switch in pick and roll without becoming the weak link. From there, the fit starts to require counterweights. And this is where the multi-team conversation becomes almost inevitable, because the Warriors need to gain scoring without completely losing the defensive spine that still holds the team together. And when the market smells a team willing to move big, the price rises. Because nobody gives discounts to a franchise chasing a title. Everyone can read urgency. Everyone knows when Curry's clock is dictating decisions. So if the Warriors put draft picks on the table, they need conviction, because those picks don't come back. They're the final currency of flexibility. And this is where the other story, Kai Sotto, starts to make more sense as a complementary vision piece. Because if the team moves towards a heavy offensive investment, it also has to think about reinforcing what sustains defense in big games. Rim protection, rebounding, physical presence. Not necessarily with a center ready to play 30 playoff minutes, but with a project that can develop inside a demanding system and at the same time offer something the roster lacks on certain nights. The Warriors have always been a team that challenged traditional size logic, especially when they used Draymond at center and bet on speed, switching, and shooting. But basketball changes, the league adapts, and opponents started attacking that choice more aggressively, putting pressure on the glass and the rim. So even while keeping the identity of movement and spacing, the franchise looks at the idea of having a big body available with development upside. And Kai Sotto represents exactly that kind of bet, one that doesn't destroy cap flexibility and doesn't require sacrificing main pieces, but could pay off if the adaptation process is handled properly. And for everything to truly fit, you can see a layered blueprint. On the main layer, the Warriors evaluate whether it's worth turning Kuminga into the engine of a deal for Porter Jr., either directly or through a larger agreement. On the secondary layer, the franchise tries to preserve or recover pieces that maintain the system. Disciplined defenders, players who run the floor, who close space, and who don't need the ball to impact. And on the base layer, you get bets like Kai, who can be worked on with time, coaching, and an environment where he's pushed daily to improve the details that decide whether a center survives in modern NBA basketball. Because the biggest mistake would be to see these stories as disconnected, when in reality they are different answers to the same problem. Michael Porter Jr. is an answer to the lack of a big, constant perimeter scoring threat. Someone who opens the game when defenses try to suffocate Curry and Butler. Kai Sotto is a potential answer to the lack of usable size and physical presence with growth margin, something that can be shaped while the team remains competitive. And the tactical fit speaks to that too. If Porter Jr. arrives, the Warriors gain a tall shooter who forces defenses into more painful decisions. That can reduce Curry's wear, because fewer possessions will demand he creates out of nothing against doubles. It can reduce Butler's wear because paint help becomes more dangerous. And it can make Draymond even more valuable as a connector, because the more reliable shooters you have, the more the right pass becomes an easy assist. The system gets lighter, more fluid, and above all, more efficient in points per possession. With Kai, the upside isn't immediate at the same level, but it can be strategic on specific nights and over long-term development. In the regular season, having someone with real height can cover minutes, preserve other pieces, provide alternatives against big teams, and over time offer a body type the Warriors haven't had consistently. But that only works if he can keep up with the system's mental pace. Because the Warriors don't tolerate missed rotations, and they don't live on stagnant sets. Everything is read, cut, pass, angle, and fast decision-making. So Kai's adaptation would have to be a serious project with daily demands, not an empty symbol. And when you put it all together, you get to the most critical point. The trade deadline isn't just a date. It's an environment that changes behavior. The closer it gets, the more franchises stop testing the waters and start taking a stance. Either you go or you pull back. And at that moment, the Warriors have to decide what type of risk they accept. Because there's risk in acting and failing, but there's also risk in not acting and watching the West pull away. And for a team with Stephen Curry, that risk weighs like lead. Oklahoma City and Denver are examples of teams that punish any weakness. If you don't have enough scoring, they force you into hard finishes. If you don't have size, they beat you on the glass. If you don't have depth, they speed the game up and break you through switching. So the Warriors are trying to answer a West that is both fast and physical. Porter Jr. answers with points and spacing. Kai, in theory, answers with physical presence and potential rim protection, even if still in progress. And the final stitch is this: the franchise isn't choosing only a player. It's choosing a season identity. If the Warriors feel they can truly fight the best, the aggressive move makes sense, even with the cost. If they believe they need more than one adjustment and that depth is vital, then the trade has to be designed with surgical precision without tearing apart what still supports the team. That's why the conversations are so intense and so careful. Because a big trade doesn't just change a spreadsheet. It changes the locker room, the hierarchy, the rotation, and the way the team plays when the game tightens. And one thing you can't ignore is the psychological impact of these moves. When a roster sees the front office willing to invest heavily to win now, the message is clear. We're all in. That can lift competitiveness, sharpen positive urgency, and create a now is the time mindset. On the other hand, when a young piece like Kuminga is placed in talks, the message echoes too. Here, potential without results isn't enough. It's a hard line, but it's common for franchises living in a title window. From the fans' side, it's always the same mix of anxiety and hope, because Porter Jr. is the kind of name that makes you picture the ball leaving Curry's hands and landing with a tall shooter, free and ready to punish. It makes you imagine defenses breaking under impossible decisions. It makes you imagine a playoff series where, for the first time in a long while, the Warriors have more than one big, constant perimeter weapon next to Curry. At the same time, losing Kuminga is losing the feeling of the future, losing an athletic explosion that could become something huge, losing a bet that still hasn't been fully answered. So how does everything fit into one picture? Like this. The Warriors are trying to win today without dying tomorrow. Michael Porter Jr. is the most direct shortcut to add firepower, but it demands a steep toll. Kai Sotto is a bet on development and reach that doesn't solve the present alone, but can be part of a larger design where the franchise keeps searching for ways to support the roster, expand options, and respond to the West's physical demands. It's not a simple choice, and that's exactly why this story is burning behind the scenes. Because it touches the present, the future, and the legacy of an era. And when the decision finally happens, whatever it is, it will reveal how the Warriors see themselves right now. Whether they are a team going all in to maximize Curry or a team still trying to balance ambition and patience. But one thing is certain, this topic won't cool down, because the market doesn't wait, and the West gives no mercy. If you want to keep following everything up close, with every detail that truly matters, hit the like button now and subscribe to the channel. Also, check that you're subscribed with notifications on, because any move can happen at any moment. And when it does, you'll want to understand the real impact, the right way, without noise and without filler.